the first step in this process, first of all, I've heard that some of you have gotten some Photoshop lessons in tech skills. Is that true? Okay, so that's great. So that means you're kind of already familiar with Photoshop. So that's awesome. Later on in the year, we're going to do another assignment with Photoshop that's more along the graphic design kind of a bent, but this will just be we're only doing one thing with Photoshop. Okay. So the first thing we've got to do before we get into any of the Photoshop stuff is we've got to copy the images over to your computer. Okay. Right now, I've got all the photos that were taken on the network on the lessons drive, um, but we don't want to actually take those photos and do anything with them. We want to make copies of them and bring them over. All right. So that way you have your own local copy of the files. So at the bottom of the screen here on the taskbar, there's a bunch of icons. There's one here that's looks like a manila folder with a letter A in front of it. That's the student lessons drive. If you click on that, you should see a list of teacher names, last name first, alphabetically listed. All right. Now, a lot of you will click on this and not see that. So if you don't see what I'm showing you right now when you click on your student lessons drive, that means you need to refresh your network connection. And in order to do that, here's what you do. Please forgive the horrid appearance of my desktop, which is full of clutter, just like my actual desktop. Um, on your desktop, you should have a folder called CGHS Tools. If you double click that folder, you should see 4 files. You'll see one called login script. If you double click on that, you'll see this dialog box pop up. Just hit run. Don't worry about what it says. And you'll see this black box with this code scroll through. Just let it do its thing. Don't touch anything. It'll only take a few seconds. It's just kind of doing some checks to make sure that certain drivers and things are installed on the computer. Come on, there we go. All right, now try it again after you do that. And it should work. Go back to the lessons drive, and it should work. If it doesn't work after that, after running the login script, then you probably need to restart your computer. And if that doesn't work, then I don't know what to tell you. You probably have to take your computer to STARS and have them look at it. All right. So once you have gotten the lessons drive open, scroll down to find my name, Kempel.Chris, right here. Double click on it. And there's a bunch of folders and stuff in here. Don't worry about any of this stuff. Go to 2019 Stipple portrait photos. Go to period 7, which is this particular period. And you're going to see a whole list of files. Right now, you can't tell which one is which. So if you go up to View and select either large or extra large icons, then you're going to see everybody's photos. Okay? Just like that. So now everyone is going to have to bring these over to their computer. Now, obviously, you don't need all of these. You just need your photos, right? What you do not want to do is mess with the content of this folder in any way. You don't want to accidentally delete a file or move it somewhere else or somehow change these files. I want to leave these as they are, because if you make a mistake, screw up somehow, and you can't fix it, you need to be able to come back to this folder and get a new copy of the master file, right? The original. Okay, so this is just kind of to protect you from, you know, screwing up. So select any photo you want. We'll just do Declan here, okay? Once you select one or two photos, let's say you want to do both of these, you hold down Control and you have both. You can select more than one image. Right click, go down to Copy. This will copy those images to the clipboard, which is just a virtual kind of a holding space, it's like putting them in limbo temporarily. All right, now what you want to do is anywhere on your computer, it doesn't matter where, wherever you um, go to get files, like wherever, like you can store it in your My Documents folder or on your desktop, whatever. You're going to right click, go to New, make a new folder, and then name it whatever you want. You know, Declan Stipple Photos. Okay, hit Enter. Now double click to open, left click to open the folder. Now we're inside that folder. Now we're going to right click and do paste. And it's going to paste those, it's going to copy and paste those two files that I selected into this. Now I have local copies of these files. Now these are the ones that I can mess around with. Okay. Now whatever I do to these, it won't change the master copies that are on the L drive. Is that clear? Does that make sense? Okay. Because every year there's always somebody who is not paying attention to what they're doing, and they manage somehow to delete all the files in the folder or do some other really bad thing. And it's like every year I'm like, how did you manage to mess up this badly? And they're like, well, I don't know. So I have to go and recopy them, and it's, you know, kind of a pain. So please pay attention when you're doing this. All right, now we're going to open these up in Photoshop. Okay. So on the bottom of the taskbar down here, I actually have Photoshop pinned to this taskbar. And it's a little icon with the PS in the blue box. Okay. If you don't have this, which you probably don't, go over here to the Windows icon, like the Start menu, and go to your apps on the side. And under A, you'll see all these Adobe programs listed. Go to Adobe Photoshop CC 2018, and you can open it that way. All right, but I've already got it open here, so I'm just going to click on this and bring it up. And you might see something like this. Go to Open, or you could go to File, Open, either way, and find the folder that you want to use. I'm going to go up a level, select period 7. All right, these are all of the photos that are on the drive. So I'm going to actually go up, or actually I'm going to go here and go to my desktop, and I'm going to find that folder that I copied, the Declan Stipple right here, and I'm going to select them. You can select one or both, doesn't matter. I'll just select one of them and hit open. That's going to open it up in Photoshop like that. Turn this off for the time being. All right, so it's going to look something like this. Okay. Now we need to do a few things to this before we're ready to start stippling. We need to crop it a little bit. We need to take the color information out of it and play around with a few filters and see if that helps us visualize stuff if we need it. All right, so we'll do one thing at a time. First thing we're going to do is crop it. Now there is a crop tool here in Photoshop along the left-hand side, um, but I'm going to show you a different way of doing this. I'm going to go up here to the rectangular marquee tool. Click on that. Up here, if you weren't already aware, these are the option menus for each tool. And if you look up here, when I switch to different tools, you see how that information changes, okay, from tool to tool? So anytime I want to access the options for a tool, I go up here. Um, on the marquee tool, under style, you'll probably, when you open yours up, yours will be set to normal. You want to select fixed size, and you want to enter 8 space IN for the width and 10 space IN for the height, because we're going to do an 8 by 10 drawing. Okay. Now that means whenever I click inside this image, it's going to automatically create an 8-inch by 10-inch border, right? No matter what I do, it's going to do 8 by 10. So I don't have to worry about clicking and dragging and getting it just right. One click, and I've already got the exact size I need. If you click outside of the selection, it's going to just make a new selection where you click. If you click inside the selection, however, you're going to be able to move it around. So move this selection to a good spot. Like, you don't want to have a bunch of dead space up on top or anything. Move it down so that you've got a decent amount. You can move it over to one side or the other, kind of keep it something like that. Now all I have to do is go up to image and go to crop, and it automatically makes it that 8 by 10 that I want. Okay. Let's zoom in a little bit on this. Hit Control Alt plus. Okay. Now we want to make this a black and white photo because we're doing a black and white drawing. So it's going to be easier to see the values if we take the color information out. So go up to image again, go to adjustments, go down to desaturate, and now we have a black and white photo. Going to go up to image once again, go to adjustments. Now we're going to go to levels, and you'll see this histogram pop up. A histogram is just like a visual kind of a graph of the dark and light pixel range of the image. If I click on the white arrow on the right-hand side and slide it to the left, you see how it gets brighter? And if I do it too much, it gets kind of washed out. Conversely, if I click on the dark arrow on the left and slide it to the right, it's making things darker. You can individually kind of slide these. Usually I take it to the point where things start to go up in the histogram, and that'll lighten things just enough. Same with the dark. You can do it that way, or let's go back to it. I didn't mean to close that out. Go to auto, and that usually will do it just enough. See, it sort of slid it over. It's a very subtle change. I'll do Control Z to undo it, and you can kind of see you could probably not really notice it from where you're sitting. It altered it just a bit, but not too much. But that should be good. All right, now if we zoom in really close here, I'll use the zoom tool for this. This is actually a pretty crisp photo, but we are going to put a slight sharpen filter on this. Let's zoom in on the eye and you'll really be able to tell. All right. Right now, our image size is 300 pixels per inch, which is a good solid resolution. You usually don't want to have anything lower than that as a photograph and as a digital photo. Um, a lot of images you see on the internet are like 72 dpi, and that's because they want to get the size down, um, because it's for internet photos. You want photos that don't take up much memory for web pages. Um, and a lot of those are JPEGs, which is a compressed format. Um, but for an actual photograph, like for printing and things like that, you want a nice big image. So 300 dpi is like should be the basement as far as that goes. So 300 dpi or higher is the best. All right. So as we can see, just like we wanted, our image is exactly 8 inches by 10 inches, and we have 300 resolution. So that's good. Currently, it is set at 20.6 megabytes. That's how big the file size is right now. Because we're not doing anything with this other than looking at it, it doesn't really matter how big it is, so it's okay. So we'll leave it as is. I just wanted to show you that if you ever want to check the dimensions or the resolution of an image, that's where you go. Image size. Let's go to filter and go down to sharpen. And we'll go down to unsharp mask. And as you can see, it already kind of, I'll go ahead and slide all these to 0, or just enter 0. There we go. This is how it looked before. Now we're going to take the amount up to, I don't know, anywhere between 75 and 100, and the radius up to, I don't know, 6, 7.5. You don't want to go all the way because it really makes things super washed out. So this is good. Let's do 8. I don't mess with threshold. Hit OK. All right, now I'm going to do a before and after. You kind of see the difference. You see how it adds a little more contrast to the edges. You can really tell them here. This is before and after. So if you're stippling this, you've got a little more contrast and a little more crispness to the edges once you do the sharpen, the unsharp mask. Okay. So that should be plenty if we're stippling. Plenty of detail and information. Okay. Now we want to eventually apply a grid to this, but first I want to show you something with filters. If you have a hard time seeing the edges of this, like, and you would rather see like an outlined kind of an image just for the sketching part of this, there are a few filters that might help you. If you go to filter and go to filter gallery, first let me change my foreground color to black. I'll tell you why in a minute. All right, go to filter gallery, and you're going to see a whole bunch of options pop up. Go down to sketch. You'll see something like this. Go down to sketch and play around with photocopy. I'll zoom out of this a little bit. All right. And you can slide the darkness levels. Now this isn't perfect, and you might get different results depending on the image that you have. But this is a good one where you can kind of see, more of the edges a little bit better, like as lines. if you're sketching this out in pencil, or stamp works a lot of times too. If you do the sliders right, that's set too dark right now. But if I go back and bring the smoothness down and bring the light balance down a little bit, like if I was drawing the eye, that's a good sort of dilution of the detail around that eye so that I could focus on that. I'm not saying that you have to use these filters. You don't. It's just an option. Um, and you can just play around with other things. Halftone pattern is fun. You wouldn't want to use it for this, but it's almost like a stipple in a way. Um, so there's all kinds of, if you go under artistic, there are cutout might work. I don't know. That's kind of cool. Bring the number of levels down, or maybe up rather. Edge simplicity. It's sort of it sort of helps you visualize stuff. So again, you can play around with this if you want to. It is purely an option. Um, but you might find something that works for you. Um, ink outlines, maybe? I don't know. You just got to play around with it. But honestly, I think that the best one is photocopy. Photocopy is, in my opinion, the most helpful one for this assignment if you need a filter. All right, so that's kind of just a little quick side note. All right, I'm going to cancel out of that. Keep in mind, though, that if you do decide to use a filter, please make a copy of this layer first. So go right here, go to duplicate layer, hit OK. See, now I have two copies of this layer. So if I go back to filter and do, filter gallery again, let's just say that that's what I want, hit OK. Now you see I have two versions. I can turn this layer off with the eye, so I can switch back and forth between these two as needed. All right, it's just helpful. Because when you actually stipple, you're going to want to stipple from the original image. You don't want to stipple from the filtered image, right? Because the values on this are not correct. Does that make sense? You don't want to stipple from this because this is just to get the pencil sketch visualized. When you stipple, you need to stipple from that. Yeah? Okay. Just being thorough. Okay. Final step. We want to add a grid onto this. So in order to do that, we're going to go to View, Show, Grid, and click. Now, if you want to change the grid in any way, I personally like a grid that has 1 inch by 1 inch squares. And you see I've got my rulers up here. If you want your rulers to turn on, go to View and just have rulers checked. Yours will probably look like this without the rulers. So always go to View, check rulers. And if you want to change the grid to something else, like let's say you're doing this eye and it just does not look, it's not working, it doesn't look right, and you need more squares within this to do the eye, simply go to Edit, Preferences, all the way at the bottom, go to Guides, Grid, and Slices. You're going to see all these options here. You can change your subdivisions to, 2, 3, 4. Let's do 4 just to see what it looks like. Let's change our lines to solid, and let's go from yellow to red just to see the difference. Hit OK. Now when we zoom out, see how we have all those extra subdivisions between each grid line? Now I have more lines to work with. So if I'm drawing this eye, now I have more lines to kind of match it up with. So there are some parts of the drawing that you might benefit from having more lines. But overall, I don't like having all those lines. I think that's too many. So I like to keep mine at just one by one um, squares. So this is already set to 1. Set your subdivisions back to 1. So you could do it like every 2 inches and have a really small grid like that. So you've only got 4 squares instead of 8. But I think that's too big. So I think 1 is, in my opinion, the best. The key is you just want to make sure that you have the same number of grids on your photo as you do on your drawing. So if you've got 8 across, 10 down in Photoshop, you better have that on your actual drawing and vice versa. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems. Let's change that back to 1. Hit OK. There we go. Now we are pretty much ready for sketching. Okay. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is that in the past, I used to print these out for everybody, and then people would work from the printout, the hard copy. But if you were to print this out right now, if I were to go to File, Print to print this image out, the grid would not show up because the grid as it stands now is only displayed in Photoshop. It will not display on a printout. If I want the grid to show up, I need to create a new layer in the stack and go in and trace over all these lines on a new layer and then print it, and then it'll show up. But honestly, I found that if you just have your computer out, you can work straight from the computer because the benefit is that with this, you can zoom in as close as you want. And that's very helpful. You can't zoom in on a printout. So you're definitely going to want to make sure that you have your charger adapters and that your computers are fully charged every day when you come in here, or that you have your computer to plug in. All right. If for some reason you don't have a computer or you don't have an adapter, you can use one of the workstations in the back there on the tables. All right. So now the next step after you get all this done is you're going to get a piece of white drawing paper just like this. This piece of paper is 9 by 12, and our drawings are going to be 8 by 10. So that means if I have an 8 by 10 on a 9 by 12, I have 1/2 inch margin on either side and 1 inch margin on the top and the bottom. And then I've got my 8 by 10 rectangle centered in there. Then you will take this 8 by 10 and draw 1 inch dots along the top and the side, and you're going to very lightly draw straight lines across and make a grid on this piece of paper that matches what's on the screen. Does that make sense? And then you're going to use that grid to very lightly sketch out a pencil outline of your face and your portrait onto the paper. And after you have done that, then you can actually start stippling with your pens. Okay? Now, I have students who take too long on this step. This should not take you more than like 2 or 3 days to do. All right, if we're going into next week and you're still struggling to sketch out your portrait, then you need to rethink your strategy because we don't have a ton of time on this. Okay. A lot of students get intimidated by this assignment, which I understand, but please just do your best. Do not get intimidated. Just take it as a challenge and do the best you can. That's all I or anyone else can expect of you. I'm not looking for perfection. Perfection does not exist. So just do the best you can. Put the time in. If you fall behind and you go really slow, you're just going to have to work on it outside of class. I think if you can get anywhere from 1 to 2 squares done a day, you shouldn't have any problem finishing this whole thing up in a couple of weeks. Now, not all squares are created equal. Some of these grid squares are going to be pretty easy to do. Some are going to be really complex. The other question I get a lot is, should we try to work the entire drawing at once, or should we literally just try to work on it 1 square at a time and like finish 1 square at a time? And my answer is that's up to you. Personally, for me, I like to work the whole thing. But there are some people that work square by square and they actually do a really good job with it. My brain just isn't wired that way, so I can't do it that way. But if yours is and that works best for you, then go for it. Okay. Just you got to really pay attention to the drawing, to the photo. You've got to really look at the photo. The danger is when you are stippling and you stop looking at the photo and you just kind of start making stuff up and you kind of go off guide, and then that's where you run into problems. I would say though that I think it's easiest if you start off in an area like the hair, where if you make a mistake, it's easier to cover up, or on areas like if you have like a really dark section of your drawing, like you have a dark shirt on or you have really dark hair, start in there and build up some confidence because it's going to be all black anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Build up some confidence in those areas and then work your way out. I will say work on the face last, especially the eyes. Save the eyes for much later. Okay. There are videos on the website pertaining to stippling faces and portraits that I think would be helpful for you to watch. I don't want you to waste class time watching them, but if you're at home or you're at lunch or something and you have your computer out, watch 1 or 2 of them. And I think that that would benefit you as well. All right. Any questions about any of the stuff that I've shown you? No? All right, great. So that's the process. Um, if we have about 10 minutes left of class, if you want to go ahead and start copying stuff over now, you can. If you want to at least get your photos copied over to your computer and opened up in Photoshop, then that's awesome. And then tomorrow we can actually start drawing grids.